Let's take a look at renin right now. Now, angiotensin 1 was also a hormone we were going to take a look at. That is included in this. So we're going to look at several hormones associated with renin. So another name for renin, I'm not going to test you on this. I just thought it was interesting. Another name for renin is angiotensinogenase. This right here, the A's part, just lets you know this is actually an enzyme, which is a special kind of protein, if you guys remember back from AMP1. So we're going to take a look at the stimulus, what causes the secretion of renin, where is it secreted from. We're going to have to learn a little bit about the nephron to be able to do this, the target, what the target response is, what class, and we're actually not going to talk about disorders and diseases with respect to renin. So the stimulus. Now I'm going to throw a bunch of words at you guys right now. Um, don't worry about those right now. I'm going to explain what they are in the next slide. So if none of these words make sense, this is something you can come back to and take a look at later. So 3 stimuli that you need to know. A decrease in blood pressure, which I hope you guys know at this point is associated also with a decrease in blood volume. So those kind of are synonymous. But it's a decrease in blood pressure, and this decrease in blood pressure is detected by juxtaglomerular cells. Now, these are special cells that are found associated with the nephron. So we'll talk about where those are specifically here in just a minute. A decrease in sodium ions. These are detected by macula densa cells, which are located within the distal convoluted tubule of the nephron. So again, associated with the nephron. So you're getting all of this information is being detected by different areas within the nephron, which is the functional unit of the kidney. Now, on a side note, uh, while the macula densa cells, they're actually detecting low sodium levels at the end of the nephron, they're really ultimately detecting a low pressure coming into the glomerulus. So if you've got low sodium at the end, you probably had low pressure coming into the nephron. So that's kind of a relationship there. I'm not testing you on it, just kind of interesting information. Now, the other stimulus that is going to result in the secretion of renin is sympathetic nervous system activity, your fight or flight response. So, when that kicks in, that will also trigger the release of renin. So, let's kind of take a back seat for a second and let's talk about the nephron just to make sure we're all on the same page with this. So, again, the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. So, what you've got here is your kidney. And if we were to just kind of blow up a section of that, you can see here we've got nephron number 1 and we've got nephron number 2. So you can see the 2 different nephrons in the picture, and then they both feed in to this structure right here known as the collecting duct. Now, the collecting duct is going to take urine to the bladder. So it's going to go to the ureter, which is going to empty into the bladder, which is finally going to go outside the body. So by the time the contents get into the collecting duct, we can pretty much say it's urine at this point. So this is the end of the line. So let's take a look at the nephron and kind of spread it out a little bit so you can kind of see all the different parts. And there's a few parts that we need to pay attention to because these are ones that relate to renin. So when we spread this nephron out a bit here, we can see the glomerulus. Now, the glomerulus is a bunch of blood vessels. It's just a intermix of a bunch of incoming blood vessels. And the blood, remember, kidneys filter blood. So the blood is going to leave this capillary bed right here. And I hate to say capillary because we're not exchanging gases, but it's going to push, the pressure there is going to push uh, a lot of the contents out of that glomerulus, and it is going to enter into this first section here. Um, of the nephron called the proximal convoluted tubule. So we're just going to leave that there. So the glomerulus is the entry point. It's where the filtered blood begins. Now, with the glomerulus, you have, if you see, two blood vessels associated with it. You have, and on this picture, it doesn't really tell you which is which, and that's okay. We're just going to take a look here and guess. So this blood vessel right here, let's say, one of these is called the afferent arteriole, meaning it's bringing blood in to this glomerulus. And the other one is going to be, whoops, sorry, is going to be the efferent arteriole. So again, notice they're both arteries. So we're not dealing with gas exchange here. So we've got blood going in, oxygenated blood going in, we've got oxygenated blood coming out. Afferent means it's bringing towards, so it's coming into the glomerulus. The efferent one is going to be what's taking it away. And again, it's still oxygenated blood. The other thing I want you to notice is what's next to the glomerulus. And this is kind of where our focus is going to be here. So we've got this distal convoluted tubule right here, also known as the DCT. And look at the proximity of where the distal convoluted tubule is to the glomerulus. I mean, that's right there. So the area of focus is this section right through here. This is really where we're taking a close-up view of this area. So again, that's why the components of the nephron that we're focusing in on when we're talking about renin is the glomerulus, the distal convoluted tubule, and those blood vessels, the afferent and efferent arterioles that are bringing blood into the glomerulus and taking blood out of the glomerulus. So let's take a look at this big word here, the juxtaglomerular apparatus. If you just look at the word parts here, juxta means next to. Well, now what the heck is this apparatus next to? Well, juxtaglomerulus, it's next to the glomerulus, which is the first piece of where that blood comes into the nephron. Now, within the juxtaglomerular apparatus, there are a few pieces that we need to be aware of what's there. It does contain the structure. So when we talk about the juxtaglomerular apparatus, it is this area right here. Okay, so it does contain part of the distal convoluted tubule, and the distal convoluted tubule has these special cells in it called macula densa cells. Now, these macula densa cells within the distal convoluted tubule detect low sodium. Um, and when low sodium is detected, they communicate with the juxtaglomerular cells to secrete renin. In addition to the distal convoluted tubule in the juxtaglomerular apparatus, we also have the afferent arterioles. Now, I don't know, again, in this picture, it doesn't say which one is the afferent versus which one is the efferent, but the afferent, the incoming blood into the glomerulus, contains these special cells called juxtaglomerular cells. And these juxtaglomerular cells, they have a couple of functions, but one of the function is it detects a drop in blood pressure of what's coming into the glomerulus. So taking a close-up look of this whole setup here, you've got your glomerulus here. This whole thing is the glomerulus. You have your juxtaglomerular cells. They're wrapped around in blue right here. And look at what they're associated with, that afferent arteriole. So we have blood coming in to this area, into that afferent arteriole. So again, when pressure is low, As blood comes in, it's going to be picked up by those juxtaglomerular cells. That blood is going to enter in the glomerulus there and then exit through the efferent arteriole. And it's going to pass through the entire nephron. So we're going to go through the glomerulus, we're going to go through the proximal convoluted tubule, down the loop of Henle and back up, and we're going to arrive at the distal convoluted tubule. So this is kind of the end of the route for this filtered blood, which is now urine almost at this point, and it's going to be coming through. And if you notice, that distal convoluted tubule passes right by that afferent arteriole and that glomerulus. Now, that distal convoluted tubule has these special cells. The distal convoluted tubule has these special cells called macula densa cells. Now, these macula densa cells right here, they are detecting low sodium. So sodium ions are going to be coming out. They're going to be passing through that distal convoluted tubule on their way out in the form of urine. And if there's just not enough sodium ions present in that distal convoluted tubule, the macula densa cells will pick up on that and trigger the release of renin. So just a little background of what all's going on here. So where is this renin secreted from? So we talked about the triggers that cause it and the cells within that juxtaglomerular apparatus that are picking up the different conditions. And we keep saying, okay, well, that's going to cause renin to be secreted, or that's going to cause renin to be secreted. But where is renin secreted from? Again, we're still in the juxtaglomerular cells of the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the nephron. They are these cells that make and secrete renin. So when we're looking at our figure down here, we've got this afferent arteriole, and surrounding that afferent arteriole, we have these renin producing juxtaglomerular cells, which are these cells right here. And you can see all those little black dots, which are in those juxtaglomerular cells. You can see them on the other side of the afferent arteriole as well. So they're right here, and they're right here. They're going to be secreting renin when blood pressure drops into the bloodstream. Okay, so that's how renin is going to get into the bloodstream. That's why they're granular. Those granules are the renin. So the renin is going to travel in, and renin is going to travel right on back out through that efferent arteriole and enter the circulation. And then you can also see, I do want to make a note here. We said there were 3 triggers that cause the secretion of renin from these juxtaglomerular cells. So one of them, we said, was the sympathetic nervous system. And these right here are neurons that are communicating with, guess what? Those juxtaglomerular cells. So when the sympathetic nervous system is engaged, it's going to communicate with those juxtaglomerular cells, telling them to secrete renin. In addition, we have these macula densa cells over here. So this was condition number 2 or so, or something like that. These macula densa cells are also going to be communicating with these juxtaglomerular cells. So when the macula densa cells of the distal convoluted tubule detect that drop in sodium, they will tell the juxtaglomerular cells here to secrete renin. And the other thing is, the juxtaglomerular cells themselves are detecting low blood pressure, so they can secrete renin on their own. So you got 3 things going on here. Now that we've got renin in the blood, renin triggers the beginning of what's called the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone pathway. So once renin is present, this triggers a pathway of events that occur. So we're going to start with, we got renin here. Notice it came from, they're just using a general picture here, kidney, we know specifically renin came from the juxtaglomerular cells of the kidney. Um, Now, I'll go ahead and mention the overall result of renin secretion is increased blood pressure, but we'll get to that in a second. So, the drop in blood pressure results in renin being secreted from the kidney. Now, the liver down here, he does a lot of stuff, and the liver secretes this uh, molecule called angiotensinogen. And it's just always secreting the molecule. So we've always got angiotensinogen floating around in the blood. So it's always in there. When renin meets up with it, however, renin and angiotensinogen combined result in angiotensin 1. So you've got to have both the renin and the angiotensinogen from the liver in order to make angiotensin 1. Renin is actually going to cleave and bind to the angiotensinogen, resulting in this next molecule, angiotensin 1. And as it's going around the bloodstream, the lungs are going to be making this molecule called angiotensin converting enzyme. It just always makes it. So as the blood passes through the lungs, when angiotensin 1 is present, it will bind with that angiotensin converting enzyme, also known as ACE, and it will result in the formation of a molecule called angiotensin 2. So angiotensin 1 combined with the ACE, combination of those two, they've both got to be present, are going to result in angiotensin 2. Now, angiotensin 2 is going to have several different things that it's going to affect. Several, like 5, I think, is how many I think I wrote down in the next slide. So it's going to communicate with the adrenal glands. And when angiotensin 2 shows up at the adrenal glands are going to secrete aldosterone. Now, we know that aldosterone actually gets secreted from the adrenal cortex, but that it just shows the adrenal glands in the picture here. Aldosterone is going to act on the kidneys, so it's going to go back and talk to the kidneys and cause water to remain in the blood, which is going to increase blood volume, which is going to increase blood pressure. Now, angiotensin 2 also acts on blood vessels, causing vasoconstriction, which again also increases blood pressure. So, what is the overall result of renin being secreted? The overall result is we have an increase in blood pressure from many different areas. So, what is the pathway for the renin angiotensin aldosterone pathway? So, I'm just kind of saying in words what the picture just said. So, we've got renin, which is being released from the juxtaglomerular cells within the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the nephron, and it's going into the bloodstream. Now, angiotensinogen is already in the bloodstream. It came from the liver. And those two, renin and angiotensinogen, are going to bind. And it's going to create a new molecule called angiotensin 1. And angiotensin 1, because the renin and the angiotensinogen were in the blood, angiotensin 1 is going to be in the blood. So angiotensin 1 is floating around in the bloodstream, and it's just going to make its way through the lungs where it binds to angiotensin converting enzyme, which is known as ACE. And just again, don't forget that ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, was made in the lungs. Now, the angiotensin 1, which is in the bloodstream, is going to combine with the ACE that's in the lungs, and we're going to make a new molecule called angiotensin 2. Now, this is the one that creates all the next set of steps. So, this is the biggie. This is what angiotensin 2 causes. It causes increased sympathetic stimulation, your fight or flight response. When that kicks in, your blood pressure is going to go up. It also causes an increase in sodium reabsorption in the kidneys. So angiotensin 2 is communicating with the kidneys, telling sodium to go back into the bloodstream. So we're not going to send sodium out in the urine. We're going to keep it. We're reabsorbing it. Now, water goes where salt goes. So if we keep if we keep the salt, we're going to keep the water. And that means we're going to increase blood volume, which is going to result in an increase in blood pressure. So the increased sodium reabsorption is going to ultimately cause an increase in blood pressure. Now, another thing angiotensin 2 is going to do, it's going to increase aldosterone secretion from the adrenal cortex of the adrenal glands. And we know that aldosterone, again, is talking to the kidneys. It's doing the same thing. B and C, the result is the same, right? Because we are causing sodium to be reabsorbed. Water follows salt. So that's going to be an increase in blood volume, which is ultimately uh, causing an increase in blood pressure. So basically, everything is causing an increase in blood pressure. Another thing angiotensin 2 is going to affect are arteries. It is going to cause arteries to constrict. It's going to cause them to get smaller. The lumen is going to get smaller, which is going to result in an increase in blood pressure. The last thing that we're going to talk about that angiotensin 2 does is it causes antidiuretic hormone to be secreted from the posterior pituitary. Remember, it was made in the hypothalamus, but it's going to be secreted from the posterior pituitary. Now, antidiuretic hormone is targeting the kidneys, and it's going to target the collecting ducts. So that last place the urine is going to get before it leaves the nephron is in that collecting duct. So that's kind of where all the nephrons dump their contents is in this collecting duct. And when antidiuretic hormone is present, it's going to tell those collecting ducts, hey, keep the water, put the water back in the bloodstream. So we're going to reabsorb water, which is going to result in an increase in blood volume, which is going to have an overall result of an increase in blood pressure. So what does renin do? It results in an increase in blood pressure from many, many different sources. So again, this is just a chart that kind of shows the exact same thing we were talking about, just in a different way. So it has a little bit of a more specific information on here that you didn't get from the previous one. So you're welcome to, I don't know, maybe take a snapshot of that with your phone or something like that, uh, and get that picture. And you can always go back and take a look at it. It is a type of protein hormone. So this thing is huge. Okay. So this is not just a simple amino acid. This isn't just a few amino acids. We're talking 406 amino acids all in a big, huge line there. And it's going to form a molecule that looks something, well, it looks like this. This is the molecule it looks like. Now, renin is technically, it is a protein, but the type of protein it is it's an enzyme. I know it's kind of weird because it doesn't end in ace, right? So the specific area, not that you have to know this is just kind of interesting information. This area right here that kind of is indented, that's the active site that actually binds to that angiotensinogen that came from the liver. Okay, that's actually where those two molecules meet up. Now, this video here is an absolutely phenomenal video. It's a Khan Academy video. The name of it is Renin Production in the Kidney. So you're welcome to just Google that if you want to. I will actually just put up the plain PowerPoint so you guys can look at the plain PowerPoint and get these links if you need to. But this is a phenomenal video that you can watch on your own to get a better idea of the structure of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. Okay, so that is all we're going to talk about regarding renin.